Annyeong, it's Mikey here and welcome to Mikey Techs. This is my gaming channel where I'm going to be going over different types of products, different electronics, not just gaming but even desk setup related, so hopefully you guys enjoy the content. This is the Epomaker HE108, so this is a full-size Hall effect gaming keyboard which we're going to have to check out to see how it is. I had to get to this quite a while ago, but unfortunately it just got pushed back a bit and we're finally getting to take a look. This is the first time I'm trying out a full-size Hall effect keyboard. We're going to have to see, is it any good? How good is the software? And how does it compare with the competitors? So let's go straight into the unboxing, but please make sure to like and subscribe. So now introducing the Epomaker HE108. And let's look into the unboxing. Now, one of the things about Epomaker's packaging is it always feels quite budget. You can really feel that with the accessories portion as well. So they give you 2 extra switches, which I think is a great addition. A lot of companies don't really do this, so nice to see that Epomaker is. You do get a braided cable, but it is a USB-A to USB-C. I do wish that they looked into C to C and then adapter for 3.0. That would just be better. And they give you a manual as well inside. And the manual, honestly, it's okay. Overall, their packaging is going to feel cheap. I'm just going to be honest, it's just how it's going to feel. But let's take a look at the board now. And this is a full-size Hall effect keyboard. So that's something that's going to be interesting to consider and look at. One of the biggest things about this board is the fact that it's wireless, it's Hall effect, and it is a full-size keyboard. Now, it is a plastic-based board, so it's not going to be like an aluminum case where it feels a little bit more hefty, but you have to consider that they're probably looking for a more budget range for pricing as well. So let's weigh the board real quick before we go into sound test, and this thing weighs 1.3 kg. Now, let's do a teardown and see what's inside of this board. So first things first, this thing has flex cuts. I don't think flex cuts is really great for Hall effect keyboards because you want the stability. That's the reason why you want it a little bit more rigid. But we're going to have to see later on to see if it is quite rigid or not and how it works. Now, we're going to have to open this up. So keep in mind, guys, that I didn't do a lubed sound test because I felt these switches were already quite lubed, and we'll look into that a little bit later. So one of the things I noticed is the front side is easier to open up, but if you don't have the right tools like what I'm using, you're going to have a very difficult time to open this up. The latches are super tight, and there isn't really any opening. I had to use something very thin like the iFixit one to be able to even get it in, and then make enough space to be able to open it. Now, one thing I also noticed is to the top part, you have to really push to get it out, and the F keys like the F8 is actually going to get in the way, so keep in mind this as well if you really do want to open it. Next as well, you're going to have to line up those toggles as well, the switches for the on and off, because when you close it, those things need to be aligned perfectly. Now on the bottom of the case, you do get a silicone foam, which is something that normally Epomaker does. And then in terms of the battery, you get 2 5,000 milliamp hour batteries, so that is 10,000 milliamp hours in total. So that means you get a large battery, which makes sense because Hall effect uses a lot of battery power. So if you are using this wirelessly, obviously you're going to need a lot larger battery to be able to use it for a longer time, because Hall effect will die a bit faster compared to, like, say, TMR. Now, in terms of the back foam, it's taped on so hard. Why did they do this? I'm not a big fan of how they did this. Next time, Epomaker, please consider just not taping it on. I think that'd be the better way. But also the PCB did not have flex cuts, which is quite interesting as well. Now, in terms of the plate, it is a PC plate, and it looks like it's going to be 1.2 millimeters. Now, it is gasket mounted, as you can see with the silicone gasket that was just covering the gasket point. Now, the 1.2 millimeters is kind of surprising to me as well. I wonder if it's a way to cut costs in terms of, PCB and plate costs, because both of them are 1.2 millimeter, which is a little bit confusing. Now you can see those is the chips, and the chips are quite small too, which is a little bit interesting as well. Now in terms of the stabilizers, it is going to be plate mounted stabilizers, and overall the plate mounted stabilizers are actually quite heavily looped. I didn't actually get any ticking, which is quite impressive because most Epomaker boards that I've gotten always have a bit of ticking. They didn't have this time. Now there is foam where the spacebar is. I highly recommend removing that. The foam is actually keeping the spacebar to a very, very muted, which I don't think a lot of people will enjoy. Now in terms of the switch, you can see here that it's not easy to open. They have like this latch system, which I'm not a big fan of. You need a specific way to open it. So if you get one of these like magnetic switch openers, which like I have with the flat sides, you can then open it that way. And the stock looping on these switches are actually quite decent. The only thing about the sound wise is you're gonna get a little bit of scratching because of the spring. And I didn't do tape mod because it backs foamed. So we've done the full unboxing and checking out the board and teardown of the HE108. So right now we've done the sound test and we've checked it out. We've kept it stock, so we didn't lube anything. And the reason I didn't lube anything is because the lubing is inconsistent in this board, but overall the lubing wasn't bad in all the switches. So like lubing it would just make it kind of over looped, and it wouldn't make a much difference in terms of the sound compared to everything else. And the other reason I didn't mod the board is because, well, the whole board is already taped up so much with so much foam, and the foam is actually taped to the back. I didn't really want to tape another layer of tape on the back of that tape as well because of how much is already going on inside of this board. There's a lot of things that's happening with this board with the foam wise, and I don't think it's always the best idea to just kind of cram things in to just muffle things even more, especially when it's built with a really decent switch. The Jade Creamy HE is actually a really nice HE switch in terms of those who like a creamy sound profile. They did a great job in terms of making this kind of similar to that of the regular mechanical keyboard in terms of how the sound profile is. Now, is the sound going to be like MX? No. Overall, the board doesn't really sound like MX. There's some inconsistencies that you'll notice with the sound wise. So things I can note is that the right side here is going to sound a little bit different than, say, up here. Each row is a little bit different, as well as the right side and the left side, so the sound inconsistencies exist. And the switch also is like, some parts you'll get like more of a higher pitch, but then other parts you get a little bit of a deeper pitch. There's a little bit of that inconsistency with these switches. So these are things I noticed specifically while testing out the sound test. And another thing I noticed was that opening it up was a bit of a pain, just because it's really, really tight with the latches. And the easiest part to get the latches is going to be on the bottom side. In general, do you need to really modify this board? I don't think so. Like, it's already a very, very stocky board, and I would say you can just leave it stock as is and just use it. The only thing I would highly suggest to do in terms of these switches is probably lube the springs. There is some spring scratch that I'm feeling in terms of like some of the switches, not every single one, which is why I say the stock lubing is inconsistent. So if you do notice that, just open up the screws, get a Ziploc bag, drop it in all the screws, and then just drop some 105, shake it up, and then put back the switches together. So that would be my suggestions for that. We're going to have to really go in depth more with this in terms of the gaming, see how it's like, check out the software, and of course compare it with the competitors. So let's go right into that. So a few things that I've noticed overall. The side lighting is not super bright, but decently there, and it does provide a little bit of a nice accent. The switches aren't consistently lubed over every single one of them. Some of them are going to be a little bit more lubed than others, and I felt like the overall spring was quite scratchy. You're gonna have to lube the springs a bit, but opening them up is quite a pain. So keeping a stock is not bad. Like, the switch itself and the board itself is actually quite thocky, and it's not the worst in terms of the scratch compared to, say, some Gateron switches that I've tried in the past. Now, in terms of the legs, it doesn't provide you a lot of angle, and I wouldn't recommend using it because the sound becomes a little bit weird once you do have the legs up. I found it like, I don't know what to explain it. It's just a deadening sound. Now, in terms of the USB dongle, it's nice that there's a spot for it, and it's nice that this thing has wireless, which does have the switches in the top, and it's easy to access. Honestly, very simple. Now, keep in mind that this does have a lot of flex, so that means if you are someone who gets angry while gaming and does a lot of shotgunning, well, chances are you might break something. Now, in terms of the pricing, so we're looking at $95.99. There is a little bit more of a pricey version, which is a little bit different with a theme on it, but it's like $4 more. So you're looking at $96 normally, and then the special themed one at 100 USD, which we're gonna have to compare later to see if that pricing is competitive or not with competitors, but it's hard to compare because we haven't tried a full size yet. Now, in terms of the overall board, there's going to be 3 choices of colors, but the Switch is only single one. It is engineered to look clean, and this makes sense. Like the overall white version actually would come off as more of like a office working keyboard that's a little bit brighter, but also you can use it for gaming. So it kind of works in both ways, which is quite nice to see. They also have this 3D model on their website, which I'm not too sure what this purpose is. The only reason I say this is because it doesn't model the keyboard exactly, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, you do get all these specs here, and I would say the battery wise, the 10,000 milliamp hour battery, the 500 hours that they say, you're not going to get exactly those hours. You're probably going to get less, and depends on what kind of settings you set it at. And the fact is that 8K, you're going to be using a lot more battery. Now, the software wise, you do have a choice to download it, or you can use the web app. I prefer web app. The reason being, I don't like downloading these things onto my computer, just because, I don't know, downloading something just makes me a little bit worried. Now, in terms of the software, you do get profiles, so that's something nice. That's a plus already off the bat. You do have profiles, but the key thing is it going to have the keys for it? So we'll check after. Going into the RGB right away, the lighting's actually pretty decently bright. So if you are someone who loves to have a ton of RGB, this is something that's going to be enjoyable because you get the whole keys, every single one to RGB, and then you also get the sides. But just keep in mind that this doesn't have the full layout options like you can see on the screen already. For some reason, it only shows TKL and not the full size keyboard. So you can't really do customized singular colors, which is kind of unfortunate because I think that's one of the benefits of Hall Effect. Now, you don't have a profile key at all. So I looked out all over, I checked the layers and everything. There is 0 profile key choices, which is already a minus. The fact that you don't have that is a huge minus in terms of software. Like, this is a key thing I always mention in every single Hall Effect keyboard video is if you don't have profiles, it's really troublesome because your game settings and typing settings is likely going to be very, very different, and it could mess up your typing and really make it awkward, and then you're going to feel like the keyboard's broken or even worse things. So please, Epomaker, make sure that that is just the most important thing you set up in every Hall Effect keyboard. Now, setting up the actuations, you can see here I'm setting up for Apex because that's the main game I play, and that's the one I play ranked in the most. Now you can see here I went to Super Glide Trainer just to make sure to see like what the settings I should set and make sure everything's working perfectly. Now in terms of the actual polling rate, we are getting a high number in terms of the polling rate. That's due to the fact that the scan rate's also high, so the way that Keyboard Inspector works, it's not going to be the most accurate to get exact 8K, but it also shows you kind of the fact that it's not true 8K. It's when we change it to 1K and it doesn't change to 1K, shows me that this board doesn't do true 8K, and that could really fluctuate a lot. And if you are someone who has an older computer, really could bug out on your computer and make it lag, and it's not something that's going to be enjoyable. So this is something that's also a minus, is the fact that the polling rate cannot change properly, and the fact that in wireless mode the web app doesn't work, so that's unfortunate as well. But checking it with the USB dongle, you can see that it does 8K. So in terms of going into Apex Legends right away and testing it out, it works really well. Like the board itself felt fluid, and I'm using it to like Super Glide here. You see the Super Glide's not going fully because I'm trying to do a little bit of a different movement tech with it. It's difficult trying to do it all at the same time. My fingers are not fast enough. My fingers are a little bit too fat for that too. And that just comes with, yeah, being a bit chubby. Now, going with the actual Super Glide here and testing it out, I like to grab a shotgun because, with a gold bolt, if you do Super Glide, it does auto reload. So that's way I can make sure that I am doing Super Glides. And yeah, it was fun using the board. It is quite large. It does take up a lot of space on the desk, but it's not too bad. And the overall key thing is that Hall Effect does work. So all your settings, rapid trigger, all of that works, which is already great. And this is why I always say, like, yes, software is important, and yes, all those other features of like, high polling rate and all those things are very cool, but at the end of the day, it's not super, super crazy important. I think nowadays with how many things are out there, pretty much the design and what you want in terms of a board and how it sounds is going to be more important. So one of the benefits here as well for Hall Effect is like, You can actually do recoil smoothing in Apex. If you spam 8080 with a Hall effect board at low actuation, you get a little bit of recoil smoothing. So that's something that I found was a benefit, but you still have to practice. There's still recoil, it's just a little bit easier to control than just standing still. Now, in terms of Valorant, you can see here without turning on the snap tab, then you'd get braking, so like you actually stop, and then we can actually turn it on. Make sure to click on the right keys, press save. You have to press save or it's not going to work. And then you can see here that it has continuous movement. So these are things that you can see that does work. And again, we want to make sure all this works because those are the key reasons why people are looking to buy a Hall effect keyboard. Now, even opening up and using skills right away, you can get it very quickly and it reacts very fast in the game. And then using like Neon with our ult, you can actually do some really cool quick movement, which is another plus in terms of Hall effect, which I think is great. So going straight into the spreadsheet and seeing where this lands. So it's 95, 99, 96 USD. What really compares to this board in this list? Well, nothing really, because none of the boards are full size. You can see here that the most common is 60, 65, TKL, 75. You don't really see a full-on, full-size keyboard in here. That's because most times gamers usually use something smaller, but some people want to have just one keyboard to do everything, and you might need it for work as well. So I think this thing does stand out in terms of that aspect. Now, what other boards I would say is like boards you could grab around the similar price is like the Megger. That one you can get on sale for possibly around 100. You can obviously get the Fun 60 Ultra, which can also be very similar in pricing. So really going back to the Epomaker board, being a hot swap, wireless, considering all those things, it's not the worst thing. Now, the software isn't going to be the greatest, right? We're missing a bunch of important aspects of it, but this is going to be, I would say, pricing wise, more of a budget Hall effect keyboard just because of the size of the board, like the layout, and considering that it is wireless with a battery. So you are getting quite a lot of value in terms of just that price. But the sound wise, it is very thocky. Just the switches had a bit of scratch, which isn't great. And overall, it was a little bit inconsistent in terms of each switch and each key and how it sounded. Now, one of the things that I did feel though is that this board can be good. Like that switch can be good. It would just be nice if they also made sure to loop the springs, and then it would really make this board a lot better overall. And of course, not taping the foam on the back of the PCB. One of the things about the software is that it's not bad. It's minimalistic, but it doesn't fully match up with the board. So what I mean by this is the fact that it's showing a TKL on the web app and not a full-size keyboard is one thing. Second thing is going to be the fact that it's missing the profiles, which is not great. You can't even change it to a 1K, which is also a downside in terms of the software. So those are things that I think are very important. Like you want to make sure the software matches up with the board. All those things are details that a board should have in terms of making sure it works well, and also the support, right? Like I didn't see any updates that happened for a while for this specific board, which is not the greatest thing to see either. So software wise, I give it a 6.5 out of 10 just because of those things that I think are very important to have in a software. And then in terms of the typing sound, I give it an 8.5 because it has a nice thocking creamy sounding switch, but the scratch really does throw you off. You want even like 8.5, I'd give it like an 8. Like 8 out of 10 is probably where I'd place it because of those aspects and some of the key things that I think is missing to make the Switch sound better in certain terms of the board.
For the pricing, when you consider like it's a full-size keyboard and it's a gaming keyboard with Hall effect with 8K, it's actually not a bad price. Especially when you consider like the switches that they put into this and made the sound-wise, everything, it's not bad. Now, there's going to be some more budget keyboards out there, but there hasn't been really anything in the market that's like a full size. So when you consider the full pricing of this, it's hard to really say measure and compare with the competitors because a lot of them were like 60%, 65, 68, or 75%, and TKLs as well. So this one kind of lines up in its own category at the moment. Now, there's going to be more full sizes that will likely come out. Specifically, there's the keycard one, which I will be testing out very soon as well. So we're going to have to see how that one is and then that pricing and where this one will line up. But I think if you are looking for, say, a gaming keyboard that also doesn't look too over the top for work purposes, this could work. Keep in mind those considerations. I'll have the links in the description. You can go check it out for yourselves. But please check out the other videos I got. I'll have to catch you guys next time.